Hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf, and you're listening to Cleaning Up the Mental Mess, a podcast all about giving you simple and sustainable strategies to help you live your happiest, healthiest, and most peaceful life. In today's podcast, I interview Shana Spence, a nutritionist with a non-diet approach to health and wellness. We have an amazing and freeing conversation around the dangers of diet culture, the benefits of intuitive eating, nutrition and mental health, diet culture trends that can be harmful, body dysmorphia, disordered eating and eating disorders, and so much more. Before we begin, I want to remind you that you can listen to exclusive ad-free content on Patreon. This month's bonus episode is all about how to wire out any harmful effects from COVID and long COVID. Just go to patreon.com/Dr. Caroline Leaf for more info. The link and details will be in the show notes. And as always, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please always consult with your personal physician or appropriate medical professional for medical issues. And now, on to today's podcast. Shana, such a pleasure to have you in the studio with me today. I'm very excited to talk to you about this incredibly important topic. So thank you for agreeing to come on my show.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. I love your page. You're filled with wisdom and just such like down to earth stuff that we can all, when it comes to eating, you just make us feel calm. That's, if I had to sort of summarize you
thank you.
In a nutshell, yeah, it's like and it's good in this day and age of, don't eat this, do eat that, and all this kind of thing. It's very overwhelming. So just wouldn't you mind, they've heard your bio and so on, but can you just give us a little intro into who you are, but a little bit of a personal touch and why you do what you do?
Sure. So my name is Shana and I am a dietitian. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. And I like to follow what I call the non-diet approach to eating, to counseling, and also the health at every size approach. So the one that definitely less weight stigma attached to it. That's always the goal. And really just making people feel comfortable with their food choices, with their even lifestyle choices, because what I find is that a lot of times this diet culture realm that we're in definitely makes people second guess themselves. And that second guessing really often leads to stress, confusion, and it's unnecessary, right? I think a lot of people are following food rules that they don't need, that doesn't apply to them. So that's my goal whenever I post something or if I'm working with people, just to make people feel comfortable. And, of course, if there's something that needs to be said with how someone is eating, that doesn't mean that they have to do a strict diet. So I think that's also important.
I think everyone who's just heard what you said is busy going, yay, thank you, my new best friend, So that's really, we've made something that's just so pleasurable into something that's so like challenging. And, what do you eat? Where do you turn? And in the world of mental health that I move in, and I don't practice anymore, but I tell you, a lot of the issues that I dealt with in my practice were people that were just battling with body image and that kind of thing because of what do I eat? Where do I go?
Exactly.
So, I'm going to start with a question that I think first, before intuitive eating, I want to get into that, but I want to ask you, what would be, a lot of people talk about eating clean food and eating real food. And that's something I always would say to people to try and keep it neutral. There's no one diet and all the things you've just said. And then I'd say, try and eat real food. And then I would define my thing was eat real food mindfully. So I'm asking you now, is that safe to say? Is there a better way of saying it? And in terms of real food, I was saying, a local farm to table, sustainable, organic as far as possible, as processed, but as little as possible, that kind of thing. So I want to say the right things now. So I'm being absolutely straight up honest. Is there a better way of saying this? What is clean food? What is real food? What should we be saying?
Yeah, I think that there's always good intention, like for people that say that, right? Because we do want people to nourish their bodies really well. That's why we're all health professionals, right? And I think that it would be actually a really great idea. And I've also kind of kept thinking about how to say things to people where it doesn't feel still stigmatizing.
Or moralizing.
Yeah, demoralizing. And even using healthy food, I feel like people's minds kind of go to, oh my gosh, I have to restrict. So I started personally, right? Everyone can use whatever they want, but I personally use nourishment how to nourish your body. And I think that's a really great, safe way to talk to people that I've found. I'm sure other people have different approaches.
No, I like
but,
that. I like that.
Yeah, because nourishment also looks different, so I think that it's a good idea, because when we do talk about clean food too, it's like that kind of also implies, that it has to be expensive, that it has to be organic. And, if you want to buy those things, that is fine. But if you don't, or if you can't afford that, that doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. So that's important.
No, that's really great. So we've got to be careful of the terms even real and clean, because they fall in the same sort of bracket, I think. So, and it can be quite judgmental, and it's, there's all the politics involved and all that kind of thing. So I love the idea of nourishment, because it also allows for the unique individual within their context and circumstance to be able to try and deal with that with no guilt, being piled on top of them and moralizing and so on. So based on that, then that leads us to what is intuitive eating. So you speak a lot about that, and then there's so much misunderstanding around that too. So can you explain that?
There is. And intuitive eating, I kind of like to call it would be just eating without all of the food rules that people impose, on themselves and also in society. Intuitive eating is about finding a way that works for you individually, and it's not just eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. That's actually a little too simplified. It really boils down to, okay, I know what's going to work for myself. I know that I have a busy day ahead. So you know what? I'm going to eat maybe a larger breakfast than I normally would have in order to have my body nourished, because some of it's planning. Yeah, some of it's planning, because we can't, we're busy adults. We can't just stop what we're doing and eat. As much as that would be amazing.
Yeah,
right?
It doesn't always work that way. Yeah,
exactly.
5 o'clock comes and you think grumbly tumbly, and you Zoom interview and your stomach's grumbling, and you haven't had time to take a break for lunch. So yeah,
exactly. Like I said, that would be ideal, right? Being able to just stop whenever. But some of it's just planning. Some of it is also knowing how your body's going to react to foods. Because I think that people who aren't familiar with intuitive eating kind of think that you're just letting people eat whatever they want. Like, well, people are always going to crave fries. So you're just telling people it's okay to eat fries all day. Like, I keep hearing these things, and that's not what we're saying at all. And I think it goes down to, I'm sure like in, the mental health fields, this is talked about as well, but also like a huge part of eating is based in like psychology and, with intuitive eating, that idea of habituation, right? Because if we are eating the same thing every day, it's not going to be appealing. Like even something like fries. And the reason we keep saying fries, chips, cookies, is because we don't eat them every day. So they feel forbidden. So I think that's super important. Like intuitive eating, non-diet approach is not anti-health or anything like that. It's really just having people be in tune with their bodies. And no, you're not going to crave fries all the time. Like anybody would get sick of, fries.
Exactly. So it's more like going into, if you prefer to like eat 3 meals a day, or if you prefer to graze all day long, or if you prefer to, today I feel like cereal for dinner. It's like following obviously if you've got a family, it's not so easy to do that, but even within that you can, so it's instinctively learning what works for your body and what makes your body comfortable. And then does it also allow for the freedom? Like you go to dinner with friends, and obviously that's going to be, a whole different story, and enjoying that.
Exactly. And that's so important because, I know I mentioned the psychological aspect, but also social connections to eating, and that's something that, unfortunately, diet culture as a society kind of takes away, because people are, you get scared of social events because, oh my gosh, I don't know the food, or I'm going to watch my friend eat, their cheeseburger and I'm going to want one, or, things like that. And that shouldn't be the case. That's, it's very much important to have a social connection to food as well. It should be enjoyed. we have taste buds for a reason.
Exactly. And there's so much, there's a lot of neuroscience and psychology associated with the whole digestive tract and the taste buds and all kinds of things. And I love that you said that. It makes me think of a story just recently. My husband and I, we live in Miami, between Miami and Dallas. And in Miami, we have our favorite Italian restaurant. It's tiny. It's this family owned, and they make the best pasta. And we love going there. And the one night we were going in, there was a table behind us and everyone was eating the pasta. And then this one lady ordered, and you could see she was battling, and she ordered like dry chicken and salad, like lettuce leaves, literally. And as you're saying that, I felt so sorry, because you could see that she really wanted to eat that pasta and be part of the whole party, even though it wasn't our table, it was behind us. But there was that restriction happening, and as you were saying that, I was thinking all the social joy was lost there in that moment because of the restriction. I know that doesn't go to the intuitive eating, it goes to some of the other points we're going to cover today. But what this whole diet culture has created is this taken the enjoyment out of this, and out of the socialization, out of the actual process of eating. And that's what, our taste buds are so connected to our pleasure centers in the brain and so on.
Exactly. It's so important. And, unfortunately, I think it's become so normalized that, to be afraid of food in a way. And so I'm hoping that the more people realize that, no, it's actually okay, that it's okay to enjoy what you're eating. Even if it's a vegetable, like vegetables can taste good. They
can taste really good. There's so many nice ways of cooking them and things that you can make them taste so good. So that's really important. We all know that sleep is so important for our mental and physical health. It helps clean up the brain and get us ready for the next day, so we can give our best at home, school, or work. However, getting a good night's rest can be a challenge. This is why I love Ned's best-selling sleep blend, which new and improved recipe offers an even greater night's sleep. Ned remains committed to making all of their products more simple and effective, and they've done just that with their new sleep blend. This new formulation blends CBN, a powerful cannabinoid that promotes sleep, with 700 milligrams of USDA certified organic CBD from the purest single-source hemp flower extracts, and organic and wild-crafted botanicals traditionally used for sleep. The new sleep blend has 24% more sleep-inducing botanicals by weight than the previous version. And it's Ned's birthday month. If you'd like to give their new and improved sleep blend a try, Cleaning Up the Mental Mess listeners get 21% off with the code Dr. Leaf for the month of March only. It's their best offer of the year. Visit helloned.com/Dr. Leaf to get access. That's HELLONED.com/Dr. Leaf to get 21% off. The link and details will be in the show notes. What is better than following a diet plan then? What's the harm in diet? And I look down, I'm just looking at all my questions because I want to hit all these things. So what is better than following a diet plan then? What's the harm in dieting, the diet culture thing? Maybe you can blend that all together.
Yeah, I think, when we say diet should just mean our way of eating, but it often boils down to a restriction. And the thing is that a lot of folks I tend to notice get their ways of eating on the internet or from a celebrity. You always see headlines like what Beyonce's eating or what Jennifer Aniston or, all of these celebrities. And I'm like, that's great for them, but you are not Beyonce, you are not Jennifer Aniston. You need to find what works for you. I often find that that's what people go by. And they often get frustrated, understandably, right? Because you see something in the media, you see something posted, and you're just like, okay, this is why they look great. This is why, not even a celebrity, maybe just like a trainer that you're just like, this is why they look great. And when you aren't getting those results, whatever those results are, it's frustrating. And so, I think that's the biggest problem, is that people don't forget, or maybe also don't realize, that one way of eating isn't going to work for everybody. Our bodies are very much unique, and it's really important to find something that works for you, no matter what that is. So I think that's often the problem I see with diet plans, or, I just call them restrictive plans, because they're always cutting out something unnecessary. Mm-hmm.
That's that whole diet culture.
Totally. So it's unfortunate. And, that's my hope, because even if you are diagnosed or have some sort of condition that you do need to eat
in a
certain
specific way.
Yeah, there's still no reason to be as restrictive as I think that people are thinking, and oftentimes, even for, let's say, I notice that people think that gluten-free is healthier. And I'm like, well, it's healthier if you have celiac. Yes, it's
if you
healthier.
don't have celiac, which is only a very small percentage of the population, actually. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the difference.
I like that. So it's basically finding your own unique way of eating. And so that I feel very happy hearing you say that, because it makes me feel, phew, I wrote a book called Think and Eat Yourself Smart. And one of the first things I said was, there is no way, there is no one diet. You really have to find what works for you. And this whole,
exactly.
And one of the things that I wanted to ask you, we've gone through like a sort of, I think it's about 30 years where there's been this thing of, this is the way to eat. If you don't eat like this, you're going to die. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but there has been a lot of that.
It's actually not, what's sad is that it's not an exaggeration from what I'm seeing.
I mean, that in itself puts you also, I come from the whole mind-brain impact side. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you read that and think, I can't stand that kind of food, or I cannot eat like that. And that means, and so the anxiety of that is then actually causing more damage in your brain than maybe eating whatever, and, eating the fries all day long, as opposed to just enjoying them now and then, but that's causing that the anxiety and the worry about it is actually causing more problems. So that's the sort of angle I've come from, but that's why I'm so pleased for your expertise to try and help us relax about this whole thing.
Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Intuitive eating, I want to ask you, if you eat intuitively, do you tune into your body's needs more efficiently and recognize, okay, well, I feel like eating fries all day today, but then tomorrow, and you wake up the next day thinking, I just need to have whatever. It may be like, I need fruit salad, I need a good big steak, whatever it may be. So you tune into what your body needs. Is that what it kind of would lead to?
Definitely. And, I think that oftentimes too, how I like to describe food is by the taste as well. So with fries, right, most of the time they're salty or crunchy, and sometimes that's what we're craving, or like potato chips, things like that. And I think that people, that's another part of our taste buds, right? Like we want that like taste. So it's actually understandable, because people sometimes get so confused, which again, I'm not making fun of folks. It's very confusing when we're told not to eat something, but I often hear, yes, exactly. You always think you're doing something wrong, especially when it comes to sweets. I think too, like, oh my gosh, I want something sweet after dinner. Why do I want this? And I'm like, well, what sweet thing did you have all day? And it's like nothing sweet, all savory foods. Your body wants to change it up by wanting something sweet. That's actually okay. But again, sugar is demonized in society.
We see these TikToks, and we see these, all these so-called experts on, not even on, I mean, I think TikTok's probably the healthiest of the platforms in my opinion. But you see these people saying, oh, it's my birthday, I'm going to have a fruit cup, I'm not going to have a bad cake. I want a nice carrot cake on my birthday, please. I can choose the ingredients I want or whatever. And it's like, if you have a piece of cake for you, and you once a year, I'm going to have it more often. I'm going to have it more often than once a year.
Yes, definitely.
It's like, and that's the sort of concern, isn't it? Because there's all that, I know what's happening in the mind and the brain connection when you get so tied up that I can't have that piece of cake, or, whatever. I mean, that's the whole diet culture concept, isn't it?
It's true. And, unfortunately with TikTok, I'm still trying to get a hang on the app. Like I just joined and I'm just overwhelmed.
Me too. No, thank you, Shana. That's me, the same thing. I'm trying to learn how to do it too. I can do Instagram Live. It's so easy, but gosh, this TikTok. Okay, so we're
I'm just like, well, what is happening?
We will send each other some encouragement. I can tell you that is challenging.
I'm just like, I don't know, because people are like, can you do this? I'm just like, no, I need to be very simple.
In 30 seconds or 7 seconds, tell them how to eat.
Exactly. And, and the thing is that with these platforms, especially TikTok, I noticed, because I think that it's more geared towards younger folks with TikTok, that's where they're getting their information. And if you're seeing, I think that there's a challenge now. Oh gosh, what's it called? I think it's like That Girl or It Girl, whatever sort of challenge.
I have to ask my kids.
And exactly. And they probably know, I think I screwed up the name, but something like that. And it's basically following, let's say, doing, I don't know who started it, but it's like you wake up, you work out, you eat these certain things. And that's what these people are thinking. Oh my gosh, that will be me. I'm going to have these results again, and it's very influencing. Right. And so I have a friend who she teaches third grade. So these children are like 8 and they are watching this. They always ask her, they're just like, oh, like, did you see the challenge? These kids are 8 and they already know what so
a challenge
that goes to show you. Yeah. So it can be problematic.
It can be problematic. So it's really important that we do have people like you on helping people with food and so on, just to try and get a bit more of a balance in that challenge, because
I hope so.
That hustle kind of life of you've got to do this. And it may be just for a short period. So it's a fun thing and it's over. As long as it doesn't go beyond that, I think, it could be dangerous. It's like the whole trends that happen in diets. Like keto was just like, keto.
Yes.
And I mean, we even fell in that trap and did keto and loved it for a while until we realized you can't live on keto. And maybe now and then you can go back to periods of it, but it's got to be, it's also that thing of this is the one way of working. And maybe if it works for you, I'm not knocking keto, but it's just that everyone's got to now do this and demonizing another way of eating and demonizing, if you're vegetarian, demonizing meat. And if you eat meat, you know what I'm talking about. It makes it a situation.
It's
so how do you help people through that? How can we help someone now who's listening, who's caught up in this and doesn't know how to get set free?
Yeah, I think that it's so important also because we do tend to get so much information from media and who we're following. I think it's so important. And it sounds like such a nonchalant type of step, but to put variety into who you're following, right? And I see that a lot, and I can't not overemphasize how important it is, because we tend to follow the same type of
confirmation bias. Yeah,
exactly. Perfect. Exactly.
Echo chambers. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that people don't realize that there's a certain look, even if, let's say, even if it's a diversity in ethnicities or races, if you're still following folks who are trainers who are offering these restrictive measures or telling you how to eat or things like that, that's still the same type. So I think it'd be so helpful to really diversify your feed in every way and really see what resonates. Because, whenever I'm talking with clients, I give them that challenge of muting, not unfollowing. You don't have to unfollow, but just muting accounts and seeing how that feels. And they realize after doing that, oh my gosh, I was so stressed out because I was looking at this person, seeing what they were eating, seeing what they were doing. And I felt like I was comparing, even if I didn't think I was mentally comparing.
It's coding in, whether you like it or not. Your environment that you're immersed in is being wired or coded into your brain. And then you have this impact, and now you've got to go edit the impact. And so, yes, you're watching that. That's brilliant advice, that you just be selective about those things.
Totally.
The other day I was in the gym at condo in Miami, and I was working out I walked into the exercise part, and quick story. Here was this gorgeous looking girl being trained by a trainer. And this trainer was going on about this girl. Yes, we've got to get rid of this cellulite. Just,
oh gosh.
And you must eat this and that. And this girl was already, you could see and her face just dropped. And you got to see me 8 times a week. And I mean, literally that means twice in one day. She said these things. And I wanted to say to this poor girl afterwards, then the trainer left, and this girl just sat there. So I wanted to go up to her and give her a hug and say, hey, just relax, just go follow Shana, and you can relax about this whole thing. And, it was just, that's what's happening though, isn't it? I mean, it's rough.
Yes. It's, and that's the thing. It's so triggering. And I have to say, it's definitely not, all trainers. I'm still finding
that
some.
It was an exception. That was surely an exception.
That does happen. Yeah. But unfortunately that does happen. And the thing that I have to point out with trainers, and even with some dietitians or other health professionals, we are often projecting our own insecurities and own problems. And that trainer was probably, that's what you're saying about yourself, basically. I mean, and it's often times eating disorders, disordered eating is often so underdiagnosed in people. And it can be very triggering, especially when you're in that profession because you're a helping profession, right? And the thing is that I think I see it a lot where it's just like it's a form of projection. And that poor girl that was getting all of that
bad
heat.
advice. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All that heat.
Exactly. And unfortunately I see that a lot.
Well, it was triggering to people. It was triggering to me. There were other people around that were being triggered, being sort of all. So yeah, it had a quite a ripple effect. And so, I remember thinking that incident popped up in my mind when you were talking about that. Now, you mentioned eating disorders and disordered eating. Can we maybe just hone in on those? Okay, define, explain.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is that it's often a very thin line. Like disordered eating is hard to kind of define because I think that people don't realize how normalized it's become. Even if it's really just when you're very much obsessed with what you're eating and also how you're moving, right? You can be over-exercising.
The orthorexia concept, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that often affects many people because what we as a society label as health conscious can be a form of orthorexia. And that's kind of the problem because when someone is trying to lose weight intentionally, they're going to the gym 4 hours, or what that trainer said, you have to see me twice or whatever it was.
8 times in 7 days. Yeah.
Exactly. Like what?
Yeah. What?
So that's a little bit disordered because that's not normal. If you have to do that in order to get to that size or to maintain, that's not healthy. And that means that you're not meant to be that size.
So that would be disordered eating.
That would be disordered. Yeah. And same thing with really being nervous about not only the quantity of food, because quantity would probably fall more under anorexia, which is an eating disorder. But something like orthorexia, it's mostly the quality of food, meaning is it pure? Is it clean? Is it considered, organic or, things like that? But you're taking it to a level where you are afraid to eat anything that's not. So that can be a disorder. And eating disorders are just really clinical. We have a clinical diagnosis and we have a clinical way of treating them. So that's where it kind of, it's a very fine line.
Fine. And one could blend into the other very easily. You could very easily move between the two. Okay. No, that's really, really important that you've just spoken about that. They talk about one of the big things that you talk a lot about is being healthy at any size. And I love that. So can you talk a little bit, because that kind of relates well to this, what you've just answered.
Sure. And, health at every size, again, that is it's very confusing concept to a lot of people because health at every size is not health at every size, meaning that whatever you have going on, it's 100% okay to have health goals, or, maybe you want more energy, or maybe you were diagnosed with diabetes, or, whatever that may be. That is fine to want to work towards helping yourself or getting healthy in that way. But we don't have to focus on weight. We don't have to focus on especially losing weight, because so many times whenever people get these diagnoses, they are always told, they're not told actual solutions. They're just said, lose weight. And it's no, because it's a blanket statement. And the issue with that is thin people get these things too. So what are you telling them? You actually have to focus on health behaviors. And that's the difference with health at every size. We're actually focusing on behaviors. And the thing is that you might not get to, I think often people are getting to an arbitrary number, whether it's your clothing or the, number on the
BMI,
scale.
which is terrible. Yeah.
BMI is just, I cannot believe that we're still using it.
Oh my gosh. It's it's honestly should never have been used, and it's still a guideline, and it's frightening. Yeah.
It's so frustrating. And, so whatever number people are trying to get to, it might not be that number might not be your number, because you should still be able to thrive. And that's why it's so important to diversify your feed, because you'll see there's so many people in every shape and size that are still active, when I
Exactly.
say
And
like,
super
so
healthy.
many.
And yeah,
Exactly. So, and they are, some of them are in larger bodies. And I think that needs to be seen more because they're not trying to be thinner and nor should they, because that's obviously where their body wants to be. And the thing is that they're still thriving. They're still living. And that's what healthy should mean. It should be where your body is still thriving. Because I get that sometimes I hear about like knee joints or knee pain, and I have to say, as a thinner person, I also have knee pain. Like I am never told to lose weight. So I don't know why people in larger bodies are still lose weight. I was given physical therapy and that helped. And I actually saw a thread on Twitter where the same thing, where a lot of physical therapists, since they don't recommend, weight loss because they're trained in actually helping people. So a lot of times larger folks will go to these therapists and realize it's the exercises that you need to be doing. Losing weight has nothing to do with it. So it's so important to realize that. Yeah, that's what I mean by, I think I just went on a rampage, but that's what I mean by.
No, it's fantastic, Shana, because we have to, I love it because you could have a skinny person and someone who's considered obese, and the person in the larger body is way healthier than that skinny person. So so it's just, and then a lot of the work, I mean, you'd know this is definitely something you'd be very familiar with, but the way that the obesity studies were done were just so biased. And
oh my gosh.
So just, that whole thing is just like a whole nightmare in itself. And, the obesity epidemic and the disease, it's just made people, it's moralized, it's moralized and demoralized, and that completely just like, I mean, how many people that are in a larger body go to doctors and they're not getting the right treatment because you lose your weight. The reason they don't even look at other reasons. And that's a significant problem, and that's not right.
Exactly. Exactly.
You encounter this a lot with your clients.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's so important because they often, when I counsel people, I do like an intake form, like, we all do, but I make a point not to have weight on there because I'm not counseling towards weight. And, I always get people questioning when they first meet with me. They're like, oh my gosh, you didn't ask me my weight. I'm like, no, because that has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about. Like, and it's such like it's a stress relief for people because it's like whatever you have going on, again, like whatever illness or whatever, thing, your weight shouldn't have any factor in that.
Exactly. So. But it's so medically driven. You walk into a PCP office before they've even done anything, they've weighed you. And, there's so much trauma that goes around that. If anyone who's had any kind of eating issue, I know what I weigh because I would kind of say the same, but do not put me on a scale. I will refuse it. It's such a trigger.
Exactly.
And, it's like, why you don't need that for your medical. And that's where the bias and research has come through medically and things. So, Well, I'm so glad that you say what you say because it really helps a lot of things. Okay. So, let's talk about the post you put up, and we were chatting a little bit about this before we started. I love it. So basically, you were asked to speak on the topic of food shaming at a conference in DC, and you spoke about basically the Mediterranean diet being actually kind of racist. And I thought because it's like touted as the thing. So take it from there. I mean, I can read your post, but you can.
Yeah, definitely. And and it's so interesting because the Mediterranean diet is a diet that everyone knows because it's always in the media. And I think that it's so funny to me because it's something that's been studied so much, so, constantly. And we have to remember, like, there's so many other cultural diets out there. Like the fact that we keep concentrating on the Mediterranean diet is a little bit bizarre to me. And, whenever I talk about it, people always get upset because it's just like, well, it can't be racist because the Mediterranean also has countries like that are in Africa. And, and that's why I make a point to say, yes, the Mediterranean is like 21 countries, right? Yes. But I want people to really think about what they see in the media. Do you see those African countries being represented in the media when we're talking about the Mediterranean diet? Or do you see, the Eurocentric, usually white, folks representing Greece, Italy, Spain? Like, because I only see that. I don't see, unless someone is very specific with making a cookbook that is like, North African cooking, that will be the only time that I see representation. So, and that's what I mean when I say it is very much a Eurocentric way of thinking. Yes, there are many countries in the Mediterranean, but we don't see them. And that's the point. And I think that it's a bit intentional too. And the thing is that when we're talking about saying a way of eating, especially when it's one region of food, when we're talking about it being the best way to eat, that how about someone who is not from those regions? Even if it is like North Africa, not everyone's from
exactly that region. Every country has its own climate, its own ecosystem, its own soil, its own,
it's
unique.
so diverse.
Yes, yeah, so diverse.
It's so bizarre to me because that's where a lot of people, because I also work in public health, and I get a lot of questions too, where people always assume their culture is bad. Like, I'm putting that in quotes, like as far as the food. And I get that because
I take a deep breath just to kind of calm down when I hear those things.
Because people, I'm right now, communities I'm working in happen to be high in like the Latinx Hispanic population. And I cannot tell you the amount of times people will say, okay, like, how should I eat? Because I know my foods aren't healthy. And I'm like, whoa. let's stop. Let's think about that statement, right? Because when you break down what they're eating, it's a lot of vegetables. It's just that the vegetables might look different.
Go ahead. I was just looking at some of your things on the post. It's different. Yeah. It's different kinds of things because it's what's growing in that area. Sorry, carry on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's true. And the thing is that, every culture has vegetables. Every culture has grains. They might not look like the Mediterranean, right? But they're different. I remember once I was talking to this one woman, she was Honduras descent. And, again, she came up with the same thing of, I think my cultural foods aren't healthy. And I was like, well, what are you eating? Like, let's start there. And she started listing these foods. First of all, she was making everything from scratch. Nothing wrong with processed or buying things, but she was making everything from scratch. Like, I'm talking like grounding up corn to make the tortillas, like everything from scratch. And I'm just like, how on earth? Well, I know how because of the media, but the fact that she just assumed that her foods were unhealthy, and she's like, well, when you think about the populations that have diseases, right, or that have illnesses, it's like a lot of African-American, Hispanic. And I'm like, well, how about we stop looking at food? How about we look at access to food? How about we look at access to healthcare? How about we look at whether the things that we're reading, how about are they open to folks in other languages? Are they easy to read? Are they easy to understand? Because people are so quick to say you're eating unhealthy. It's like, are they, or is it just the access? Like, even in some place like New York, some places here in New York, it takes so long to find a grocery store. And when you do, like, the produce section isn't that great. So it's like access to food, access to healthcare, access to like equitable healthcare, education, all of these things, poverty, like these are factors. It's really not just you need to eat like better. It's like, okay, you can't tell someone that, like, that's another blanket statement. So I went on another rampage, but yes, that is part of my issue.
No, everything you're saying, I'm just nodding my head and I'm agreeing because it's so relevant. It's we've got a diversity of cultures, we've got a diversity of climates. It's not going to be very easy to grow an olive tree in Iceland. And now you've got to import the olive oil, and then the imported olive oil goes to all of this according to, and then, you can go insane with all these things. So we've got to kind of relax about that and look at the whole societal structure and that kind of thing. If we want to be healthier mentally and physically, one of the best things we can possibly do is get several hours of quality sleep every night. The brain and body heal itself when we sleep. It really is one of the most amazing processes, even if you're not conscious when it happens. But I know it's hard to get good quality sleep sometimes. Your mind keeps you awake, life is stressful, and there are often 100 anxious reasons why you can't fall asleep at night. Thankfully, there are also ways we can improve our sleep quality and overall health, including taking magnesium. Believe it or not, around 75% of people don't have enough magnesium. No wonder so many people have sleep problems. But please do not run to the store to buy the first magnesium supplement you find. Most magnesium supplements use only the 2 cheapest synthetic forms, and since they're not full spectrum, they won't support better sleeping habits. There are actually 7 unique forms of magnesium, and you must get all of them if you want to experience its calming, sleep-enhancing effects. That's why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough by BioOptimizers. Simply take 2 capsules before you go to bed, and you'll be amazed at how much better you sleep and how much more rested you feel when you wake up. For an exclusive offer for my listeners, go to www.magbreakthrough.com/leaf and use Dr. Leaf 10 during checkout to save 10% on your order. The link and details will be in the show notes. So that brings me to that other big question that, I'm even guilty of going on about processed foods are not good for you. There's so many of the studies of showing that the MAD diet, the modern American diet.
Of course.
And how bad that is. And I know the elements of that really are bad and have changed. There is a change in how we've eaten. There's a very strong time period. I'd love to have clarity on this. How's it based? How can we understand that the modern American diet did have a beginning point and there was a shift in people's health? Is it causative? Is it correlative? Is it what happened there? How should we handle this? How should we talk about these? And the studies that have been done, like where they've taken the modern American diet into the middle of somewhere in like Australia, and where that they just lived on the land and natural stuff, and they introduce one supermarket full of processed food, and suddenly within 3 months people have got fatty liver disease. How do we talk about these things and think about these
Definitely.
things?
And I think the important thing too, it's important to think about the words we're using, right? So processed food is always just associated with something bad. And I always say everything we eat is processed. Even when you look at ultra processed foods, things like a lot of the meat alternatives or vegan foods are ultra processed, right? So people are like, well, just avoid ultra processed. It's like, you can't really even do that if you're vegan, right? You can't even do that, because that would be considered, if we really were to go by just words, avoiding ultra processed foods, that alone also takes off a lot of food options. So let's try to really be careful with the words we use. And going to the American diet, I think that, yes, things have changed, but we also need to really think about what else has changed in society, because work, back in the 1950s, were people working like this? I don't think so. Were people on their laptops until 11 p.m. working?
Both parents working.
Yeah.
Latchkey kids.
Both parents are working, busy until 11 p.m. at night. No, it was also a cultural change. So food accompanies that cultural change. I don't remember when it was that all of a sudden, even something like canned food was a thing, that was sold or that was becoming big in America. It was because there was also a shift in the American culture and the American lifestyle. So those things are still important. Exactly. So more processed foods or more canned foods are being eaten because look at the lifestyle. If you really think about how people were cooking back then, you can't, for some people, yes, but for a lot of people who are working, our culture for work is just, when you compare it again to other countries, and this is something so important, there is a difference with the American way of living where I remember once traveling to Spain, and when I'm talking, people take food seriously. They love to eat, which was great because I love to eat too, right? But I noticed that when we would go, so I went with one of my friends, we were out at noon on a weekday. You could not find people out. People were at home eating lunch, full foods, because they went home. Their employers gave them time to go home to cook food and to eat it. we're here in the States eating at our desks. If you even get to that, because most of the time you're praised because it's like bragging rights. Oh, I skipped lunch, like, because I'm working on this Excel spreadsheet. Like that's like not a flex. Yeah. So there's a difference. So when we're talking about comparing our food to other countries, you can't just compare like everything. You have to look at the culture that's also comes with it. And there is a huge difference. Okay. And so, yes, we are eating more processed foods as Americans, but guess what? Look at our lifestyle, so that, there's a reason. And also to ingredients. I think it's super important to realize that a lot of the ingredients that are added now are to keep our food safe. So yes, they sound a lot of chemical sounding names, things like that. But guess what?
Being very demonized.
Yes. And it's to keep our food safe. It's, to make it last longer. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that people realize the government isn't trying to kill. Well, I'm not even going to go because that sounds too much. But like, I think that most of the time people don't trust food because they're like, the government's involved. And it's like, the government's actually trying to keep you safe. Like, I don't think people realize the process. Like when you think back to what was found in food back in the day, there's a reason the government's involved with what's in our food. There's a lot of things that we don't want in our food. So I think that's also another misconception. But yes, so I'm rambling here. But yes, there's a reason that we in this country we're eating different for a reason. And it does not have to do with just laziness or whatever people associate. It has to do with the culture. It has to do with capitalism. So until that changes, I don't see us changing the way we eat. So
exactly. So there's no, it's excellent. So there's a kind of a balance going on here. There is obviously the whole capitalism of making money out of food and making it quicker, and there is a loss of quality. We agree that happens, but then there's also a change. It's not all bad. So it's not, so we've got to learn to be a bit more discerning, and it's access and all those things you spoke about. And then we also have to look at the cultural changes, the adaptations you had to make, the different lifestyles. So we've got to kind of we've got to help to educate, to understand the stuff that may be really full of chemicals and not that great. So keep that sort of limited if you can. And then, get more knowledge about the other processed foods that are, the chemicals are keeping you alive kind of thing. Don't you think there's a lot of romanticism in the current, and this is something I thought of as you were talking, of kind of the when we culture. When we were back in the day, and that's how we're not living ancient lives anymore. We're not living like that. We don't have that. Yeah. So we kind of need to, adapt and eat differently.
Yeah. And that's so important because I see that a lot. Like, I want to eat the way our grandparents ate before. And I'm just like, our grandparents, at least mine, they were not making kale, spirulina, like smoothies. Okay. So it's like
they were eating what was available.
Exactly. And so, yeah, like that, I kind of get what people are trying to say, but that statement is just still full of a lot of classism as well. I'm just going back to eating real food. And I'm just like, all food is real, unless it's like the plastic ones that like the dolls eat, like, that's fake food, but everything is real.
Yeah. And as you say, it's the nutritional value. So there are some of those foods that don't have quite the same nutritional value. So it's, once again, as you said right in the beginning, let's look at the nutritional content and maybe kind of balance it. Some have got a little bit less, get some with a little bit more, and, create a kind of more balance.
And that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the intuitive thing that comes circling back to that again. This is an amazing discussion. Okay. Now, just very quickly, the GMOs, I mean, that's been such a debate. I know I've researched that and whatever. Do we want to even touch on that? Do you want to give a sort of overview or? A really great overview would be that kind of still falls into, I think it's scary to the word genetically modified organism, right? Like that sounds pretty scary. It does. And the science of it sounds very, it's like in the lab still. And
exactly. And the thing, and, I can't speak to this because food science isn't my forte, but there is a really great There are a couple actually really great food scientists to follow that I always recommend. Food Science Babe. I'm so bad because, of course, I cannot remember her actual name, but that is her Instagram and TikTok name. But she really does break down all the scientific reasons as to why it's okay to have something like, because when you look at what I think corn is always brought up, like, oh my gosh, corn's a GMO. It's like, yes, it is. But if you look at what corn used to be, there's like a reason that it's been updated.
Yeah, that it's been updated. Yeah. And that we have science to
Exactly. And I think an also important point to make is that food insecurity is actually a thing. I think that we often forget that living in this country, especially, but food insecurity is very important. And we actually have an issue with food insecurity in this country, and actually being able to feed the amount of people in this country, it's harder than it seems. So yes, GMOs are a really good thing. I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for that, but it's actually a good thing when we're trying to feed folks in this country. It's not just organic, foods, which, it's hard to come by. It's hard for the farmer as well. But GMOs, it's not scary. I know it sounds scary, the name genetically modified. I know that sounds scary, but I promise you it's actually not. It's actually a good thing.
It's a good thing, I think, going forward. I know that there's been a lot of research looking at the impact, and I know we don't fully understand the soil. I think we've got about a 95% understanding of the soil. And so but then there's also the impact of the things that we don't know about the science. But then there's also, this is what science is. It's a matter of, we're trying to help people, because I was always very anti-GMOs because I grew up in the era where my training and all that thing was it was a new science, and it was sort of it should be confined to the laboratory until we actually know what the impact is. But we're never really going to fully know the impact of anything. And I think we've now, 20 years later or 30 years later, that the science has been, I think it's 30, 40 years old now, that we are getting more insight into, and I think it's always with caution, that everything should be, doesn't need to be fully embraced. There's got to be standards, there's got to be a level of evidence that this is not going to damage the soil and damage whatever. So I think those are the principles that I think we've moved in that direction. If I track how it used to be and how GMO science is running now, as I said, I'm also not a GMO scientist, but just having followed this field 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it really concerned me that things were released out there before we understood what we were doing. But now there's a lot more evidence-based knowledge. So if I'm hearing you correctly, that it's possibly time to start trickling this out in a better way. There's been some bad mess-ups with the GMO and huge disruption. And I don't know. That's just, am I wrong? I mean, I'm totally happy to.
And I also just want to point out too, like, there's nothing wrong with also questioning what's in our food, right? Like, so I'm not saying never to question things, because I think that, when we question things, that also shows a level of, I don't want to say intelligence, but just that we're thinking.
It is maturity and curiosity and self-regulation and
So I definitely encourage people to question things. But however, where are you getting your information? Because, are you getting it from scientists, in that field, or are you getting it from social media, from an influencer? So that's the difference, right? We should be questioning things, but where are you getting your information
and from? Even the world of science is, as you and I both know, I mean, it's like
bias.
Are you just looking at one, or are you looking at comparative studies? So can you look at both sides of the coin? So I always love reading these people that analyze studies, and they'll say, okay, this is what it's saying, but this is what's actually being said. And this could be, so, then they pulled it apart. So you can actually look at that argument if you agree with the logical pulling apart of you. So that's the kind of thing I think I'm hearing you say before we just blanket statement, it's bad or it's good, or it's get knowledge, get understanding, be curious. Amazing. I love that. Your mental health is and should be a priority. I learned this from my friend, Dr. Daniel Amen, who is a renowned psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and founder of Amen Clinics. The Amen Clinics are unique because they use a comprehensive and holistic approach, including brain SPECT imaging, to treat mental health issues. I visited an Amen clinic and seen Dr. Amen in action, and I was able to see for myself how brain scans show that many mental health conditions, such as ADD, anxiety, and depression, are often not caused by just one thing. That's why giving everyone the same treatment will never work. So you can get a treatment plan that's targeted to your needs. I love that the doctors at Amen Clinics use natural therapies wherever possible. To find out how you can change your brain and change your life, visit amenclinics.com/Dr. Leaf. If you book, you'll get 10% off an evaluation when you use the promo code Dr. Leaf 10 at checkout. The link and offer details will also be in the show notes. Couple of things more, because we're on the subject. Are convenience foods like canned foods or frozen dinners bad? And we've kind of intimated and gone in this direction, but I'd like to sort of be more specific. How would you help people process this? Because I think people feel so much guilt around that. So.
100%. And the thing is that, oftentimes, again, it's coming down to what your preferences are. And preferences aren't just taste, they're also affordability. Like canned foods are cheaper, right? So, if you prefer canned green beans because that is giving you more bang for your buck, right? And that's how you can feed your family. That's fine, because when you actually compare green beans to the fresh variety, they're the same nutrients. The canned one's going to have more salt, more sodium. But if that's a thing of concern, you can rinse it. So there's still options there. Some people like the taste of canned green beans, so that's also a factor. It's like, if that's what you prefer, that's fine. And also, like folks with disabilities, that is easier for them to warm up some green beans than to cut up the green beans, the fresh ones, rinse them and cook them. It's just easier. And that's also okay. So those are options. Also, when we're talking about poverty in this country, if your gas goes out and you don't have any way of cooking, or if your electricity, you can eat it straight from the can and you're still getting your nutrients, right? That's food safety, right? So there's reasons for canned food. If you prefer fresh, and you can afford it, all of that jazz, then by all means, eat your fresh green beans or whatever have you. That's fine. So it's really just individual. Frozen meals. Also, I think the thing with concern is just like sodium again. If you have, let's say you're trying to keep track of it for high blood pressure or whatever, yeah, you might have to be more conscious of it. But if it's for safety, I would say it's still safe. Like our food is safe. I think people just feel bad, because they're not making it themselves. But again, it goes down to, if you're working from it's not even 9 to 5 anymore. It's like nine to
it's like
8.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 24-hour cycles, which is unfortunate. It's really...
Exactly. So if you're working like that, and then you're coming home to 2 kids, you're not going to feel like making a whole chicken and mashed potatoes. Maybe
and
that
first
frozen meal is
to get it fresh from the grocery store, and we've got to be realistic about our timing. And it's
exactly. So all of that comes into play. So again, stop making people feel guilty about what they're eating, because I see too much demonizing on social media, and it's really kind of turning a blind eye to all the other problems that we're having.
I'm so glad that we've got into this. We've shifted to this kind of, I know not everyone thinks like you do and like I do, and I know I've been caught up years ago in the sort of more stricter kind of regimen of eating and things like that. Okay.
Same.
So we have to grow. Yeah, I was wrong and I've changed, and I'm happy to admit it. There's some things that I was wrong about, and there's a shift, which is really fantastic. So I want to just with my throw my, I could speak to you all day long, and there's so many important questions. I'd love to have you back on again sometime, but I'd love to just bring one more question. Are you okay with one more question?
Yes, definitely.
Just around something that comes up so much, and it's so related to the diet culture, and that's body dysmorphia. So, let's talk can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And I think body dysmorphia, it kind of is in that realm of disordered eating sort of image. And the thing with body dysmorphia, it's also very much psychological and, all of that. But it stems from a place of let's be honest, fat phobia, right? Because we're thinking of our bodies not looking the way that they do, or, how others actually perceive us. We're always thinking exactly. And that honestly just stems from, most of the time, and I'm not going to say all, but most of the time it does stem from fat phobia in our country, because we are told that being larger is bad. So we're always going to think that we could be thinner, even if we are already in a thin body, like we could just be that much thinner. And we think that, oh my gosh, I look, a certain way, and it's not. And that's sort of the issue that I kind of have with the body positive movement, because it's fine. Like, we all have our body hangups. Like, I don't think any of us are ever going to get to a point of, I love my body every single day. I think that's impossible. But I often see like the body positive, it's just like these thin women, and they're like kind of doing poses to make their bodies larger. Like, see, this is normal. And it's like, no, that's not really helping, because again, like, fat phobia also has a lot of weight stigma in this country, which leads to really bad health care for those individuals. So all of that, which I'm not going to get into, but yes.
No, but we mentioned it earlier on, and it's very real. So I'm glad you brought up the body positivity situation, because that also has backfired a little bit. It's had a bit of a negative impact. I think we started out trying to be positive, but I mean, trying to be a good thing, but
trying to be a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but it hasn't quite been that way. It's created maybe more problems, you're saying?
I think so. I mean, I wouldn't not maybe more problems, because I get it. Like, we all have some days are just not those days. But how is that helping the actual anti-fat bias? Like, how is that helping that in this, in this society? Because basically what you're saying is, you are thin. You just take a bad picture. That's all. But it's okay. Don't worry. You are thin. It's just that the picture is bad. That's what body positive is. From what I'm seeing, it's like, here are some other angles. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not true. So the core underlying problem, sort of in conclusion, well, there's lots, but is we've got to get over this fat phobia, and we've got to understand the whole context that a person lives in terms of accessibility, and stop demonizing food like we have been doing, which is contributing to so many problems, taking so much joy out of so many people's lives, and adding to mental health issues. So this has been fantastic. Where can people learn more about you and learn from you?
Well, all my platforms are the Nutrition Tea. Pretty easy to find that way. So Instagram, I have a Facebook page, Twitter, now TikTok that I'm struggling with, but still on there.
Join the club.
But it's all the Nutrition Tea.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. And I know this has helped so many people, including me. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you found today's podcast interesting and helpful. If you want more tips and help with managing anxiety, depression, and mental health, be sure to visit my website at drleaf.com and to sign up for my weekly newsletter, where I also include a schedule of my speaking events and so much more. And follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just look for Dr. Caroline Leaf. Also, I love seeing all your posts on social media about this podcast. I love seeing what resonates with you and what you've learned. So be sure to continue posting and tagging me and letting me know what you think and how these tips worked out for you. And don't forget, leave a review and keep spreading the word about this podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I really hope you learned something new and helpful. Till then, I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf. This podcast represents the opinions of myself and my guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult your healthcare professional for any individual medical questions you may have. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or corrections of errors.